Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Marotta with the Center for Treatment and Study of Neuropsychiatric Disorders at Silver Hill Hospital, Yale, and et cetera. And thank you for joining us today for our room colloquium. In a moment, we will get started, but first, some housekeeping. It's their phrase. It's always called the housekeeping, right? The Silver Hill Hospital's neuropsychiatric program conferences require a trustful environment. Meetings are by invitation only. Please do not forward the invitation to anyone else without the consent of the meeting host. I give you consent. Ensure a confidential workspace. You should make sure your participation is done in a private environment. Individual participation is preferred if group participation, which is what's going on back 3,000 miles away. The host must be made aware, and Catherine has told me about what they're doing, of all attendees. So you got to now sign into Zoom using your first and last name. Participants do not have permission to record or take screenshots, but it's being recorded by the hospital to use for the CME. If you wish to receive CME, you too, or your attendance certificates, you will need to sign in and sign out each day to confirm you're here, and we'll give you the codes on the last day. Finally, the disclosures, all the planners, speakers, or individuals in control of content for the educational activity have no relevant financial relationships to disclose. With ineligible companies whose primary business is producing, marketing, selling, reselling, or distributing healthcare products to be used by patients. So now I'm allowed to get started. Okay, and I don't think this began with me. I think it began with the mission that goes back for thousands of years, which is, you know, the healing of suffering, okay? And I just feel that we've been part of that ongoing process for a long time. The particulars of what we're doing here is to talk about schizophrenia and the enormous suffering it begins not only to the individuals, but to their families and to society as a whole. And so I have a kind of matrix set up in my head about it, which is partially on one of the posters. There is a need to extend treatment across all social classes and levels if possible, because it's really unevenly distributed, especially I think in the United States. And then there's the other issue, which is to use the best possible treatment, which is complex because it not only involves using medications, some of which are not always used, meaning clozapine or clozaril, and then also being able to mix them in certain ways, complex ways, but also to go very slowly and very carefully. And that the whole treatment regime for these serious illnesses, which you can look at as being neurological and developmental, which means they've impacted a person slowly over many, many years, is not to expect you're going to give someone a pill and they're going to get better. You're going to have to change not only their internal environment, right, but also the external environment in which they live. So all that has to come together in some way. So we brought together some people who I think can really begin to address that. Okay, so the Dr. Slateman will talk about what they've done, which is spectacular work, you know, in our own area, Westchester, New York, but also around the world, developing treatment protocols, you know, using clozapine, but also taking all these young men and women into their lives and helping them get better. And I think that's a spectacular thing. I mean, at the hospital, we've been blessed. I look at it that way. First by Dr. Ackerman, who let us have space to do something different. But then on, you know, to Dr. Gerber, who lets us get away with almost anything for the sake of the patients, right? To start a program slowly. And now over the last 10 years, we've treated over 400 patients, all right, which is, I guess that's a lot, you know, because we grew up in a psychiatric world where you had 15 patients for 20 years, and we've had, you know, 400 and something patients in 10. So it's a different world we're living in. But again, we try to do like what Robbie does and what Ann does, which is to treat them intensely and stay with large numbers of them. And finally, somewhere hidden around here is Dr. Beal in the back. Is that she? Yeah, and she's trying to expand it from our privileged, and I looked at it as curated patients. We have really curated patients, right? We spend enormous effort taking care of them. Can we do something like that in the inner city? And Chris Landry, which is, you don't look like your father. Oh, his father and I have known each other since we were, God, 40 something years. You know, extending it even to the poorest and the least cared for people in New York City. So two things, you know, bringing treatment across to more and more people and to refine the treatment modalities we have. Did I leave anything out? Oh, the other thing, of course, is with Sophia, that I believe that we're in a kind of crisis that because of COVID, because of drug use, because of the stresses going on in the world, as I spoke about last night a little bit, that the intensity of illness is increasing, the resistance to treatment is increasing, and the total number of cases that we have to deal with is getting greater and greater. So the next generation, I think, will have a harder job than we've had. And we have to prepare for that and train people for that in the future. But I can't forget that this really wouldn't have come off. I really say if Dr. Cavalli, if Salvatore Riccardo had not pushed me to put this together in some way, but without Dr. Curtzio and Dr. Mann and Dr. Doherty, who's gotten up at 3 a.m. in Connecticut to run this, and to Alexander and Katina and all the others from the hospital who really worked so hard on this. And thank you all very much. So they tell me as the morning appears in the United States, more people will be coming in. So, but she actually says people are actually awake. I don't know if they're really there, Katina, but that's what she says. So 4:30. So some of the, I know some of them are up because they're signed in. So now I can take my jacket off, right? And we're